Well, before I tell you what the Clifton Strengths Assessment really measures, I want to make the case first for strengths. I want you to imagine for something, you took any group anywhere, and you asked the group, you said, which would you rather do? Write a report for your boss or give a presentation? Would you rather be part of a group that brainstormed the best approach to something, or would you rather be part of the group that actually implemented a strategy? Anytime you give people choices, you'll have various people say, oh, I'd like to do that, and others say, oh, I could never do that. So the idea behind strengths is, look, we're all different. Oscar Wilde had a wonderful quote. He said, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. So when you ask that question, you begin to think that people are different. And what Gallup is measuring through this tool are your talents. It's your natural thoughts about who you are as a person. Strengths come from practicing something. So what Gallup is actually measuring are 34 strengths that are put into 4 domains. So the science behind it is very old. They've been doing this for decades now. The reason I like this particular assessment, because there's lots of assessments that will do this, is if you look at Amazon, the #1 bestseller of all time is Strength Finder 2.0. They're close to 20 million copies now. So Gallup, and when you get the book, you get an explanation of it and then a code where you can get your strengths. So Gallup has a long history of this and lots of evidence about the kinds of things that happen when people use their strengths. So what it's really measuring is your talents, and they become strengths when you invest some time in them. But it's how you just normally like, things you like to do, who you are as a person. Again, one of the things that's important about knowing your strengths, and sometimes people say, well, I know what my strengths are, and you may know some of them. But I also think about, look, there are people who go to karaoke bars and think they can sing too. So the idea of having some science behind your strengths, and then you begin to ask, well, is this me? Do I like doing tasks that I get to use these? And the evidence is overwhelming. When you do things that are in your wheelhouse, you're happier, you're more productive. So how you use it is not to find a job where you can use it, but rather think about the job you do and how could you use more of it. So the Gallup Strengths is not a selection tool, it's a development tool. So you begin to think about, okay, what are my strengths and how can I use them more in my specific role? Now, there may be some that aren't, and that's not to say, well, I only do my strengths. We all have to manage our weaknesses. But what we know is that people are more productive, they're more engaged in their work, they're happier when they're doing things that fit in their wheelhouse. And knowing what those are and looking for them and having a boss who knows what these are. This is how we make great teams. I think one of the disservices we do to kids sometimes is say, you need to be well-rounded. And I see sometimes high school kids who are just knocking themselves out to be everything. Look, I don't care who you are. You may be able to do anything, but you cannot do everything. And knowing yourself and what your strengths are really matter, because teams need to be well-rounded. So it also helps you to create better teams when everyone knows what their strengths are and we have an appreciation for those. And then we may say, we have this particular project. Here's some people who have ideation. We need lots of ideas, people on this team. And we have people who are analytical so they can look at data, those things. So the way you use it is, first of all, is to know them. And then second of all, begin to think, how can I apply these? And then further develop them too. I think it's a human experience. It applies to anybody. That whether you're a student and you want to know, who am I? And it starts, and it's strength-based. It doesn't start with a deficiency. What we know is the research is pretty clear. If you do an employee evaluation that strictly focuses on weaknesses, there's a reason many companies have stopped doing that. They don't work. That's not to point out that there aren't things that need to be improved, but we also need to start with strengths. So whether you're in the public sector or you're in the private sector, it doesn't matter. We're human beings and we all have strengths. And in whatever role, both personal or professional, we can use those to our advantage because it makes us happier when we do that. And so we want to pay attention to them. So it's not something that's limited to a particular group. Like one of the worst things would be, well, just our executives are doing this. What a shame, because the people who have to go do the work need absolutely to know who they are too. So I can't think of anybody who wouldn't benefit from knowing who they are and a little more about themselves in some scientific process, and then having a coach or somebody to help them think about, do they use those and how they might use them more? Or if they have a challenge, how they might figure out how they could take their strength to meet that challenge.
The Clifton Strengths Assessment is an online tool. The assessment takes you through a series of paired statements and you choose the one which best describes you. It may be hard, but try not to overthink your answer. You'll want to go with your gut reaction. When you've completed the assessment, you will get your personalized Clifton Strengths results. This report comes as a PDF you can download and print. You only share it with the people you want to see it. Your responses to the paired questions are matched to one of the 34 themes Gallup has developed through its years of research. Both reports examine your top 5 themes to suggest how they are reflected in your life and work. You'll want to print out and bring a copy of each report with you to the in-person workshop. During an in-person Clifton Strengths Assessment workshop, you'll learn more about each of the 34 themes and how you can best use your strengths in your life.
Aristotle was right. You need to know thyself. And we're going to spend some time in this workshop getting to know you as you. Second of all, it'll help improve team performance. As I said earlier, individuals don't have to be well-rounded, but teams need to be. And then you begin to get an appreciation of other people's strengths, and then you begin to see it laid out visually and how important that is. The other part that we know from strengths is that if people use strengths, it improves engagement of workers. Now you might say, well, why is engagement so important? Engagement is a proxy for productivity. It's a proxy for less absenteeism. It's a proxy for satisfaction. And it doesn't matter if you're in a not-for-profit and you're measuring impact, or you're in a private enterprise and you're measuring it by net income. We know that when people use strengths, those numbers will go up. Because again, that's why I like the use of Gallup. They have a long history of applying this science. So all those things in the workshop, the science behind it, and most importantly, how you can apply this in your work and everyday life. This is, I often say, it's not astrology. It's like, oh, that's nice, you're this and I'm that, and then we go off and forget it. This is about who I am and how can I use this. And sometimes in the most challenging of situations, you need to think, okay, here's how I can help someone or a team by using this strength. And the other thing that it does, it acknowledges to everybody that we have strengths. Too often you think that we start with deficiencies. People start saying, well, what can't you do? Peter Drucker once said, famous management guru said, it takes less energy to go from being good to exemplary than it does from being incompetent to mediocre. So part of this is knowing your strengths and how you can utilize them more.